My name is Cameron Patterson. I'm the managing director here at the Robert Russell Moton Museum. I am joined by my colleague, Mr. Kanan Townsend, our Director of Education and Public Programs. Together, we will be helping to guide our conversation this afternoon. And we are so excited to be joined by 4 distinguished individuals within our community. And I would like to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. In our previous conversation over lunch, Dr. Ferguson led us to the doorsteps of 1959. And our hopes with this panel session is to continue that conversation and talk about what happened here in Prince Edward County when public schools closed, and to talk about the impact that that decision had on these individuals and their families and their friends and this community as a whole. And so I will allow them the opportunity to introduce themselves and to also let us know the grade that they were in when schools closed in 1959.
Good afternoon, folks. My name is Bob Hamlin, and the year 1959 is a year I will never forget. I thought the most devastating thing could happen to us here in Prince Edward County when it became very evident that schools would close and not reopen in the fall. I was going into the 12th grade, and so I had struggled for all those years getting through school, never missing a day, only to have the school doors close and I'm not going to graduate. And I was most worried about a promise that I had made to my mom that I would graduate high school. I would be the first in the family to do so.
Hello, I'm Elsie Walker, and when schools closed, I was going to this school. I was in 7th grade.
I'm Everett Berryman Jr. In 1959, I was at Murray Branch, number 1, in the 6th grade, going into the 7th grade. I was born here in Farmville, grew up in western Prince Edward County, the side of Pamplin, Virginia, and there we stayed until schools closed and came back when schools reopened.
I'm Carl Eggleston, and I was in the 2nd grade, promoted to the 3rd, and my family been a lifelong residence here, even though I was born over in Amelia County, but my family moved here in 1952. And I had a perfect attendance in school because my father made me go to school.
As we move a little bit backwards, following the Brown decision of 1954, if you all could talk about that decision and maybe talk about how you felt the community grasped that decision and its magnitude, and did you have a good understanding of the role that the county played in bringing forth that decision during that time?
Quite frankly, I did not. I was, just a young child at that point. I don't know for sure if that decision had stuck and what kind of a note it struck for me, other than to think foolishly that it meant that we would immediately all go to school together.
I do agree with Mr. Hamlin. I just thought about that, and just in talking, I guess with your parents and siblings and just other members of the family, you just think about, okay, schools are going to open and we will all be in school together and we'll be equal.
When schools closed with me, I was just looking forward to the extended summer and enjoying it and having a good time. And looking forward to schools opening the second semester. Of course, they did not. So we began to do other things. I began to think in terms of what it is I'm going to have to do now to keep up with my cousin that was in Maryland. And we were in the same grade, and he was getting ahead of me. So it clicked at that time that we were not in school. I was falling behind. And now what it is that we're going to do, I'm going to do to keep up with him.
When the schools closed, my parents owned a little business, so I had to go to work. And matter of fact, my father and my mother made me, most of my father, get up about 4:30 in the morning, go to work, help him clean up the shop. He had a little furniture shop, and then get back and go to school. And then as soon as school ended, I had to report back to him to do some more work. So I didn't get the opportunity to play around a lot like a lot of students did, because like I said, my parents had this business, and he made us work in that business. So the impact it had on me is that I've been a workaholic all of my life, so I guess that's been positive in certain aspects.
So as we kind of moved closer to the summer of '59, could you all sense that something was brewing in regards to this decision that would come forward regarding defunding public education? Was it something that was talked about within your family, within your community? If you could just care to elaborate on that. What was the atmosphere like leading up to that decision?
I think the atmosphere for me was extremely scary. And then one side of me kept saying, oh no, they will not keep the schools closed. They have to allow us to all go to school. But then another side of me was saying, oh yeah, they would do that. They will open this white academy for the white children only and just forget about us black children that need an education.
Well, you know, at that age, and thinking about it, as I think about it even now, I was raised in Prospect, Virginia, and we have a little country store, country family store there, and it's still there. And with the black and white patrons coming in and out, I never thought, you know, everybody just seemed to be so friendly. So I never thought that schools would stay closed, and I just took for granted that they would, you know, be opened up again, you know, again soon, even when schools opened in September. But as time went by, I realized that they were going to stay closed. And then also at that time, some of the people that came in, especially the whites, were not as friendly as they were from the beginning.
Leading up to 1959 school closing, I really did not find out until I was in school, college that is, and in recent years, actually Dr. Ferguson really did an excellent job this afternoon of explaining all of what was going on that we had no idea that was going on behind the scene. What we did at Five Forks School, which was a two-room school, first and second grade, third and fourth, we had Ms. Baker there as a teacher, first and second grade. We had Ms. Womack, third and fourth. We had two excellent teachers that taught us very well, and we kept our head in the game, so to speak. We were a community school, and we just enjoyed one another. We had no idea schools were going to close and things were going to happen in 1959. But we were prepared to go to the next grade level, and that's what we were looking forward to. So in 1959, schools did not open. And again, we look forward to extending summer, and from that point on, I guess we'll get into that later.
When schools was closed in 1959, I could remember my parents seriously talking about something must be done, and we can't continue to allow our children not to attend some type of schools. So in addition to him, I guess making me doing some work that I probably didn't want to do, but he and my mother eventually decided after a couple of years that he could not tolerate this anymore, so he rented a home over in Cumberland County and maintained his home here, and we lived in Cumberland County for the next 2 years until the free schools opened, and then we came back and canceled the lease on that property over in Cumberland. But it's something, it's unique that the school I went to over in Cumberland, as a matter of fact, I passed that site yesterday on Route 638. It was called Robert Russell Morton as well. And it was a two-room school. And my teachers were mighty marvelous about seeing that we get a decent education, at least until the schools open back up. So I had the opportunity to go to school the second year. The first 2 years we didn't, but the second year we did. So, but they were seriously concerned about that.
So I think in terms of educating current students and visitors about the school closings, what's particularly powerful is the power of a story, right? And so 3,000 people plus, each one of them, even if they were in the same family, could have a completely different experience depending on how old they were or how young they were. Some families sent the young kids away. Some families kept the younger kids and sent their older kids away. It just really depended. Some didn't go to school at all. So if you all could just talk for a little bit about just your general reactions, and some of you have kind of alluded to that, but a little bit of your story, right? A little bit of what your reaction was, and then kind of what happened. What did you do when the schools closed down? And if you had siblings as well, kind of differences or similarities between what your siblings did when the schools closed. So how you felt when the schools closed, and then what kind of happened to you after that?
Well, I was 9 then when that happened, so my recollection is not the best, but I noticed that I was concerned that we were not going to school, but we would see these buses moving with Prince Edward Academy about us while we were sometime playing in the street and having a good time to a certain degree. My father let me have a little good time sometime, but he pretty much a workaholic and made me be like that also. But I did feel somewhat concerned about those who did not have the opportunity to go to school. And I guess their parents didn't have the means to rent a home in another county so that their children could go to school. So I was very fortunate with that. And I think I've learned a lot from that. And the whole ordeal suddenly had made me a stronger and I think a better person.
I think I'll have to go back to the foundation that we were built upon. When I look back at the NAACP, the NAACP played an important role in our life in Prince Edward County. Sulphur Spring Baptist Church, we heard it every second and fourth Sunday before schools closed and after school closed, how important the NAACP was. I don't think the leaders in Prince Edward County, especially Western Prince Edward County, get the credit that they deserve. Deacon O.E. Scott, Deacon Robert Scott, Telly Berman, my grandmother, T.C. Berman, my grandfather, all of the Greens, Allens, and all of those people, and I'm leaving out a lot, played an important role in keeping us focused. And we had a faith-based foundation upon us, and that was a no-fail situation because we believed and trusted in a God that knew all things. And that is where it began with us. That was our focal point. That was our strength there at Sulphur Spring Baptist Church with the leadership that we had there. We were always focused on what the NAACP was doing and what a part they played. And when we didn't want to hear anything else about it, Deacon O.E. Scott every Sunday morning. Now, some of y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. Got to pass this plate around, taking up this collection for the NAACP. So it played a role, and we had a faith-based community there. And the whole county was faith-based because these churches played an important role in what happened to us and where we were going. And it was a lot going on there. So in terms of where we went from there, we were focused on a purpose. Now, I may sound like a preacher now. We were focused on a purpose that God had appointed for churches, kept our attention on. That's what they believed, and that's what they taught us. And that's the strength that we stood on. And then we moved on from there as to other things that we had to do to acquire an education as we moved on. For me, it was the centers for 2 years, Pampton and Prospect, then 2 years at Carver Price. The free school system opened here in 63, 64, and we moved back into the county. We still had a home place up there, still have it, and we moved back here, and then we'll get into that later.
Well, as I listen to Reverend Berman and the NAACP, I think I'm going to call a name. Mr. Robert Scott made sure that all the young and old belonged to the NAACP at that time. But when schools were closed, the first year I stayed out of school. The second year, my mother and father, along with 2 other families, rented a house in Appomattox. Well, half of the house in Appomattox, half was located in Prince Edward County. The kitchen was in Appomattox, and the bedrooms were in Prince Edward County. So we only got to stay in school for 3 months, and then we were put out of school in Appomattox. So I stayed out of school for that the next year, rest of that year. And then the American Friends Service Committee came to Prince Edward County, and my sister and I were fortunate enough, along with some other students, to go to Berea College Foundation in Berea, Kentucky, and I was there for the next 2 years.
I think my young life's experiences prior to the school's closing had prepared me for that day. My family became the first black Muslims within Prince Edward County in 1951. And one of the teachings under Elijah Muhammad was that black folk needed to become much more self-sufficient, growing your own foods. And we already lived in the country. We had a farm and everything. But like I said, my family became Muslims in 1951. So my mother firmly believed that no matter what, the white people, the white leadership of Prince Edward County was simply going to do what they wanted to do, and that they were evil. And so she just constantly said, don't worry about it. God will take care of it. And so when the schools did close, yes, I was devastated. Yes, I felt betrayed. But at the same time, my family just kept pushing on and pushing on. So what did happen to me? Schools didn't open as we expected they should. By Labor Day of 1959. And I had had many offers from family members that lived in northern cities because they felt like we were backwards anyway. But to come and live with them and attend school there. It could be in Baltimore, could be in Philadelphia, New York, places in New Jersey. But I begged my mom and dad to not make me go. I really did not want to leave home. I had never been separated from my parents. Fortunately, my dad was he was self-employed businessman, and he worked away from home during the week and came home on the weekends. That area of Northern Virginia that you now know as the asphalt jungle used to be all pine trees, and my dad was one of those contractors that cut down those pine trees in Northern Virginia. So we came home on Friday evening. My mom said, "Your friend Flossie Oliver wants you to come and see her tomorrow morning." I said, "Why? We were friends, but we were not like that." And so she said, "I'm not sure, but we need to go." So first thing Saturday morning, we all get in the car and off to Flossie's house we go. And Flossie asked me, he says, "How come you're not in school?" And I'm going like, "Okay, Flossie, what is this? You know we don't have a school." She said, "Well, I know they close the schools here, but haven't you heard about what Reverend Griffin and what Reverend Dunlap has done?" No. "Haven't you heard about Kittrell College in North Carolina?" No. "Well, Reverend Griffin and Reverend Dunlap has made it so that Kittrell College will allow some of us from Prince Edward County to come there to go to school. They had a high school curriculum from Vance County." And as she explained that to me, this was on Saturday morning, by noon on Sunday, we were on the road to Kittrell College, and I enrolled immediately. And I stayed at Kittrell for that year, graduated high school in 1960, as I should have, and then I stayed for 2 years of junior college and graduated junior college. So, to take the short road, all of this could have made me an extremely bitter person. But I have come to believe that if you're happy at this moment in your life, no matter what, you'd have to know that everything before this moment in your life had to happen. Otherwise, you might miss this moment in your life. And so, schools closing here in Prince Edward County led to a multitude of other things. I was placed on a college campus. I graduated high school. I graduated junior college. And I entered college over in Durham at North Carolina College. I didn't stay, but at least it fed that thirst. And so I wound up working for a while, for a few months, at the Medical College of Virginia in Richmond. Then Uncle Sam come knocking. "Hey boy, come here. I got something for you to do." And so I really did not want to go in the Army. I did not want to have to carry a weapon. I didn't want to shoot at people, and I certainly didn't want people shooting at me. But I knew that I was either going to have to go or suffer the consequences in some way. My mom was devastated that I chose to enter the military. I said, "Mom, I really don't have a choice. They're going to draft me. And if I gotta go, I would rather go someplace into a military that of my choosing. So I'm on my way home from work one day, walked past the recruiter's office, and there was an Air Force flag hanging out in the front of this building. I go and talk to the Air Force recruiter. He gave me the ASVAB test. I did extremely well on that. He got a little background information on me, found out that I was a business major in college. He said, I think that you would fit well as an administrative person in the Air Force. So I'm going like, what does that mean? What I'll be doing? Well, you could be doing any multitude of things, but you wouldn't have to necessarily be carrying a gun or a weapon or whatever. I was a conscientious objector. And so I said, okay, sign me up, boss. So I already had an induction date into the Army. He said, we'll take care of that. So I let him sign me up. 3 days before my induction date, he calls me up to tell me that he only had one slot to fill for his quota, and that another person had come in and scored just a few points higher than me on the ASVAB test. And he said, I have to give him that slot that I gave you in administration. I said, so what does that mean for me? He said, well, I can still put you into the Air Force. You would go into general. And I'm going like, okay, that sounds very ominous. I could be doing what? Anything? Well, yeah, but chances are with your background, you'll wind up in some administrative field somewhere. And I'm thinking, okay, so what are my options at this point? And he said, you can either take that or revert to the Army. And I thought for a second, not a minute, just a second. And I took his option. Because I just could not see myself pounding the ground, walking through the woods in the Army, carrying a weapon, and shooting at folks. So, long story short, I stayed in the Air Force for 20 years. And I loved almost every minute of it. I was a medic for 20 years, taking care of people rather than hurting people. I retired in 1984. I re-entered college, graduated with my bachelor's from Indiana University. And then I went to work for the North Central Indiana Private Industry Council, a nonprofit organization providing employment and training services to the underserved people. And then I returned to Virginia after 40 years in 1999. And I became the Deputy State Director for in-school and out-of-school youth programs for all of South Central Virginia. Had not the schools closed in Prince Edward County in 1959, I'm not sure what direction my life would have taken. But I do know that up to this point, I've had a good life. I was handed a lemon, and I was able to make lemonade.
So, as someone who came to Prince Edward County almost 15 years ago, I had to quickly learn about the various pockets of Prince Edward. You've got Prospect, Rice, Darlington Heights, and in some ways I think that makes our county unique to hear of and to see of the various communities that make this county what it is. So in reflecting on that, all of you come from different pockets of Prince Edward County, including the town of Farmville. Can you talk about how your area of the county had an impact in your thoughts, understanding, perceptions of what was happening during the school closings period? Were you politically in tune with what was happening in your area or within Farmville, the seat of the county?
I think my parents were in tune with what was happening in the county. But again, my parents, being Muslims, really had not paid a whole lot of attention to what was happening within the county and the leadership that led the county. I do recall when Roy Williams and other NAACP leaders had come to Prince Edward County, and they spoke out at High Rock Baptist Church, which is right across the road from where I live. And I don't know why, even as a child, I wanted to go, but my parents didn't go. And I think it's only because at that time, there was a kind of a struggle between the NAACP leadership and the Black Muslim leadership. And so they didn't go. But I do know also that my parents, and particularly my father, did very little to no business within the county because of what was happening, because of the political landscape. His business was outside of Prince Edward County, and he kept it that way. And he drove a new Harley Hog. And every time he'd drive that Harley into Farmville, he'd get pulled over. Otto or Jack or somebody, one of the Olsen, you know who I'm talking about, would pull him over. He also drove a brand new Buick, the longest car I'd ever seen in my life, not to be a limo. But whenever he would drive that car into Farmville, he would get pulled over. Never get a ticket, just harassing, that's all. And we would usually have our Muslim meetings on a Sunday afternoon starting at 2 o'clock in a little building across the road from my house. And it was not uncommon for Otto Overton to come out and knock on the door just to see what we were doing in there.
Well, with the closing of schools, by being, I would say, at Hendrick's store at all times, with, like I said, people coming in and out, and with a lot of NAACP, with a lot of the Scots living in Prospect, we always had, I guess, conversations on the closing of schools and if they were open. Okay. I didn't think you really need to hear. Anyway, sorry about that, thank you. With the closing of schools and everything, and we talked with the NAACP being there, like I said, most of the Scots and everything being there in Prospect, and they were very, I guess, we just wanted everybody to know what was going on. And then we had Reverend Franklin, James Franklin, and several others. They did talk about the closing of schools and what was to be done and all. We were always told that, eventually schools would open, but meanwhile, we had to get some type of education at that time, so we did have schools in the different churches and at some of the houses and all. With the people coming in and out of the store, Hendrick's store, they talked about the schools and if schools were open and not open, and some said they would not want to see their children going to school with the black children. And this is, for those who know my grandfather, you know, he would say, I see some people looking around laughing, he would, whatever he wanted to say, he would say. And there was this white guy that came in the store, and he said, I would never let my children go to school with blacks, grandchildren go to school with blacks. He said, I would kill them first. My grandfather said, you better go and get your gun. And that was not very nice, I know, but it's just the way he said it. It was just the way he said it, and he was serious about it. But the other gentleman was serious too. But he did live to see all the schools being integrated, so, you know.
My experience during the school closing was very unique. It led in so many different directions. From the centers to moving into Appomattox County, going to Carver Price. My experience through that ordeal took a different direction. What happened to a lot of the youngsters here in Prince Edward County, and I've been reluctant to telling my story, simply because I guess with what some of the youngsters were going through, they wouldn't want to hear my experience as I went through and what I went through. When I went to school at Carver Price, my whole life changed. I went from two-room school to Murray Branch, 1st through 6th grade, to K through 12. And that opened up a whole nother opportunity for me, all opportunities. I was 14 years old, and I was the tallest guy in the whole school. The coach told Daddy to let me have him, and I'm going to make a basketball play out of him. Well, I didn't want to hear that, but that's what happened. I could tell you a whole bunch of stories off of that. I had my driver's license. I got my driver's license when I was 15 years old. And one day I was just browsing around at the bus shop in Appomattox County. And the manager at the bus shop asked me, son, do you have your school bus driving license? I said, no, I don't. She said, go down and take the test, come back. We'll give you a test run and you'll be ready to drive a school bus this fall. Now, can you imagine a 16-year-old in this day and age driving a school bus? But that's what I was doing at Carver Price. I was a substitute bus driver at 16 years old and for 2 weeks in 1963. And when schools opened here, I got a regular bus route that ran the Pamplin route through Prospect, Fire Fork on down here. And being 2 years behind in school, I was in the 9th grade at 16 years old. So learning how to play basketball, I was on the JV squad, played some varsity because I was just that good at that time. And I went on to have a good high school basketball career. I won a couple of scholarships to schools, but I decided that I was going to join the Navy. But now, the key to joining the Navy was Doris, my wife. She and I started dating when I was a senior in high school. And when I got out of high school, she already had a job lined up for me. As a matter of fact, I like to say when I walked across the stage to get my diploma, she was standing at the stage right there and grabbed me by the hand and had never turned it loose yet. But anyway, and right down the Craddock Terrace, she led me on the top floor, 90 degrees. Can you imagine how hot it was up in there? So I said, look, something got to be done here. So Navy, here I come. So I joined the Navy, and that was a unique experience because my grandmother didn't want me to join the Army because it was the Vietnam crisis was going on, and she just told me join any branch other than the Army. So make sure you join before they draft you. So I joined the Navy. So I stayed there, and that was a unique experience, and everybody going on cruises, and this, that, and the other. But I have never heard of anyone taking a cruise of the Mediterranean for 6 to 9 months. To 2 or 8 or 9 countries in the Mediterranean at taxpayers' expense. So the reality was, then coming back, doing school, you know, I was always in a position to help. I was always in a position to lead. And when I got out of the Navy, I was married. We got married, and we moved to Lynchburg. And from Lynchburg was a unique experience. I went on to college from there on the GI Bill. As a matter of fact, I had a job at GE before I got out of the Navy. They called me on the ship and told me, can I come to work Monday? I still had 2 months left. So I said, no, I'm still in the Navy now, but I'll be there the 13th of October. This was 69. So I got out on the 1st. So I went to GE, and going through school on the GI Bill, and worked at GE Erickson for 30 some odd years. And I got laid off in '86. And then they're going to retrain everyone for another job. So they put me through graduate school there at Lynchburg College at their expense. So the reality of it was, coming through all of these years, I have never, this was my story, I have never felt as though I was a victim of what happened. I never looked at it as what they did to me, because it was 1,700 of us. So I never made it personal. I never did. I don't know why, I never did. It was something within me that I guess kind of woke up and said, what is it that you are going to do to get to where you want to go, where you need to go? And that made the difference in my experience with being out of school, coming through those years, and maybe some others. And I have been reluctant to tell my story because it was so opposite of a lot of the other experiences. And when I look back on it now, coming through those years, coming through school, and being called to the ministry, I began to see a purpose of why that happened to me. So the challenges that I had led to greater challenges that led to other challenges that led to greater things in my life. So in 1976, I went into the ministry, and I've been pastoring 43 years. I pastored 8 years at a local church. Then I resigned, and I began a community organization, a nonprofit, and also a Christian Education Center there in Lynchburg. And these are coming off of the challenges and experiences that we've had to help one another come through various things that they're experiencing as we go along. And the uniqueness of why we are the way we are, I have learned that we are where we are. We are where we are. And we move from that point. And when I challenge people from this perspective, we are all one in the spirit. We are all one in the eyes of God. And the thinking process that we have as we move along and as we grow together, if I'm there, you there, we're one in spirit. So the reality is, as we teach one another and help one another, and our experiences, as Brother Hamlin has said, would we be here today had it not been for the experiences that we went through? So there are a lot of things that I could just go through and share. We'll be here until 6 o'clock. But it's just so many things that I could point out and bring out through the course of this conversation this afternoon. I have been blessed and been very fortunate, and I'm just thankful, if you want to put it that way.
Beyond the interactions from school, I was particularly missing from that because my family always lived in the town of Farmville, so most of my experiences would be with either First Baptist Church, some activities that was taking place there, and individuals who sometimes come down from other areas to that particular church. I've been a member there now for 64 years, and most of the thing was involved with that particular church. So I guess the biggest thing, never had much reaction from other communities since we left school, and I guess that was something that was really devastating. That a lot of friends we had that we were meeting, talking in school, but once the school closed, that pretty much left a void, and you could not communicate with them because they was in another community at that point in time. So I kind of missed out on a lot of that.
There's a quote I've always heard that I'll use to lead me into the next question that I'll ask. And that quote is talking about the differences between the North and the South. Just there's a common misconception that things were very, very peaceful in the South. I mean, peaceful in the North rather than the kind of hecticness that was in the South. But in reality, it was very different. Each kind of area had their own different set of issues. And the quote goes something like this: in the South, blacks and whites can live next to each other, but they don't want you to go to school together. In the North, blacks and whites can go to school together, they don't want you to live next to each other. Right? So very similar, but very different. The issues were very, very different. So I hope that each of you could give us a little insight into your view of race relations at the time and how that might be different depending on where you lived in the county, because that's always something that I find fascinating to hear them talk about, how different it was based upon the perception that we might have had, but their reality might have been totally different depending on where they were in the county. So you can race relations and depending on the area that you lived.
I can recall that as far as race relations, is that individuals who came from up north, particularly down here to help students or either just to mingle, was more friendly or was more willing to communicate and more willing to mingle than individuals here. Basically in Farmville and Prince Edward, we was pretty much divided, and either you was in that community or this community, or you would see each other maybe at work or maybe downtown. But after sundown, it's basically, we do our activities with our individuals that we are familiar with in groups and organizations, and you do what you have to do. But I know it's much, much different for people who visit Prince Edward. They was willing to mingle and socialize than people here.
To piggyback off what Carl is saying, it was very unique. I agree with what he's saying about the difference in some of the northern people coming down. However, in western Prince Edward County, we had a good working relationship with the white people in our community. And that was the unique thing about what was happening. And as Ms. Cobbs has stated in the last session, Joan that is, there were people that were against the school closing. And we were fortunate enough to be, no doubt, a part of that community. Pamplin was not far from Darlington Heights. And in that particular region up there, we had interaction with whites like they did not have here in Farmville, maybe they did not have in the Rice area or Meherrin area. I can recall my grandmother and grandfather when they needed hay cut or when they needed various things done on the farm. All of the white farmers that had equipment, they would come over and do that and keep getting up, pay or no pay or whatever, and go on. And we had a general good working relationship with individuals in western Prince Edward County. But as Carl is saying, we did not necessarily socialize with one another. We worked together well, but we didn't socialize with one another. We got along well, but we didn't socialize with one another. It's kind of unique. I've often wondered why that was, but that was the way it was, and that caused our experience, or caused my experience, no doubt, to be somewhat different from some of the youngsters here in the Farmville area. Pamplin is a part of Appomattox County. Appomattox County, Prince Edward County is a part of Pamplin. So I guess it just all connected there and went from that on to the experience that I shared.
Well, I guess Prospect connected to Pamplin. And as Reverend Berman said, it was like, in a way, one big family. And I'm going back to Hendrick's store again, they had this big piece of wood, I don't know what you would call it, that they had checkers on it. And they would come in, black and white would come in, and they may play a half a game of checkers and just leave it. The next person come in and they would, play, and everybody got along really well together. Except, maybe a couple of incidents here and there. But, sometimes we turn around, we look at each other and, but it's not us. It was our parents or grandparents that didn't understand during that time. And it's from the way they were raised. So things have changed, things were changing, and I know things will continue to change. But it's just, like in Prospect area, everybody really honestly did get along well together.
In my case, it was more of watching parallel worlds. There was a black world and there was a white world. And you didn't socialize. The only time that whites and blacks were together was if they were working the tobacco fields. But otherwise, there was no socializing at all, except not openly. But I do recall this man that lived down the road from us. They were the next farm down the road from us. His name was Shank Bates. And he and my father would sit out in the yard in the car and talk for hours. He never came in the house. His wife attended their church down to the left of our home. And of course, High Rock Church was down to the right of our home. And on occasion, that church would invite some parishioners from High Rock to come to that church. But they would have to sit in the back of the church. I recall also, after I got into the Air Force, people coming up to me after they found out I was from Prince Edward County, Virginia, and I would explain what had happened in Prince Edward County, Virginia, and they would, oh my goodness, that was horrible, that was terrible. Where I'm from, we would never have had anything like that. And I said, well, where are you from? Well, I'm from New York City. And you're black? Yes. Well, tell me this. In New York City, can you live wherever you want to live? Or can you buy a house wherever you want to buy a house? Well, no, most black folks who live in Harlem or they live in such and such a place. Well, that's a form of segregation. If you can't live and you can't buy a house where you would want to buy a house, that is a form of segregation. And I don't think most people realized that at the time. I also recall we used to I was a medic in the Air Force. And we were allowed, those of us that were medics, to have what we called midnight chow in the dining facility in the hospital. Now, what was midnight chow? It was breakfast at midnight. If you wanted to have something extra to eat, you could go and have breakfast at midnight. I didn't have a car, so often I would have to walk, or I would get a ride with somebody else that was going to midnight chow. This particular night, it was a group of 6 of us, and we were all riding in this car. The owner of the car was from Ludowici, Georgia, and he was white. And we all got along just great, chatting it up, whatever. Went to midnight chow. On the way back, now right across the road or the street from our dormitory was a graveyard. And it belonged to a black church down in Savannah. As we approached that graveyard, the owner of that car from Ludowici, Georgia, said, well, if the rumors are true, they're going to close Hunter Air Force Base, then I guess the niggas can have back this graveyard. And all the chatter in the car stopped. Not another word was said. Pulled into the parking lot, we all got out of the car, and we all went to our rooms. About 15 minutes later, I get a knock on my door. Bob, can you open the door? And I recognized the voice. And I cracked the door open. And he said, man, he says, I'm so sorry that you heard what I said. I said, why are you sorry that I heard what you said? Are you sorry you said it? Didn't matter if I heard it or not. It's a matter that you said it, that you thought it. And he said, well, man, please forgive me. Please forgive me. I said, no, I can't. And I closed the door and I never spoke to him again. And I did not want that to define me. I didn't want it to define me. But in that moment, it angered me tremendously.
So I'll kind of move us forward a little bit, and there's an emergence of student activism that begins to take place here in Prince Edward County in the 60s as schools have been closed for a few years up to that point. If you would care to, for those that were involved in those efforts, if you could talk about that, talk about the impact that those efforts had within Prince Edward County regarding the school closings.
I'm going to pass on this because I wasn't here. Once I left in 1959, I really did not return to Prince Edward County to live for the next 40 years.
Well, I was here during that time, and I did go to March on Washington. I just remember it was such a hot, hot day. For those who went, it was really hot. But it was nice. It was educational with Reverend Martin Luther King, and there's so many singers. There were so many gospel singers and all there. Like I say, but it was educational. And then with the marches here with Reverend James Franklin, Reverend Williams, and Reverend Griffin, We were out early in the morning, marching all day, and we would have little classes in the morning just for Reverend Griffin and the rest of them telling us how to act when once we got out on the street and all. We had to be very professional. And if somebody called us name or spat on us or spit on us, something like that, we had to continue to walk. There are a lot of pictures out there, and I think that Ms. Doris Berman, and I were always together. If you saw one picture on Facebook or something like that, or when you go and Google the pictures, you'll see the two of us together marching together. And every now and then they would have some little critical name, but anyway, that was okay. But we did learn a lot. We tried to go into places to eat and all, and tried to get into the theaters. We couldn't do it, but now we can. But and it's, like I say, it's just, I guess, a matter of time and of how you present yourself, and just not giving up. To me, Prince Edward still has a long way to go, but we have advanced so much. And I presented all the walks and everything, and with several others that are here.
That was a very unique time for me, too. I was 2 years at Carver Price, and I didn't want to let the rest of the students down here. I had made up my mind that I was going to graduate at Carver Price and move on. But I found out that they were demonstrating here, and I participated in those demonstrations here as well. I had a 55 Chevrolet that I wish I still had today, and we used to load up in Prince Edward County, up there around Hendricks Store, up there with Elsie and all of her crew, and Doris and all of the crew from up there. Sometimes we had 9 or 10 in the car coming down here. They'll put me in jail now for driving all the people like that. And we had a unique time. We knew what we were demonstrating for. We knew what we were all about. And the whole community had come together for a common cause. And Prince Edward County still may have a long way to go, but it's come a long way. And we are very family-oriented in the county here. That's where we learned when schools finally opened, we knew everybody in the county because we had to work together to accomplish certain goals. And walking and doing the demonstrations, carrying signs and sitting at J.J. Newberry, and all of those things that we did were unique experiences for us as we went along. The one unique thing about it, though, here in Farmville doing those demonstrations, just like Dr. Ferguson said, the power structure made sure that there were not going to be any violence. A lot of people may not know that or didn't know that, but they met somewhere, I think around Petersburg, and that was one of the things that they discussed. They did not want to have the violence here like they were having in the lower South. So they did some unique things to go about changing that. So I noticed on several occasions when we were crossing the street, we had police officers that would stop cars, that would help us across the streets, and I thought that was really unique in terms of what we were trying to do, but yet it had a feel that they kind of assisted us in a lot of things that we were doing. And the experience is so, I think about it a lot today, and it was so unique at some of the things that were happening to us, and at the same time, some of the things that they helped us do along the way or helped us get accomplished. So it was a mixed bag with me. When you critique it or when you look at it, you see this on one angle, you see that on another angle, and you just try to come to the conclusion as to really what happened? How did we come through this? How did we achieve these things? So demonstrating at that particular time was something that really led to a unique experience. And schools opened that fall, and we moved on from there. Reverend Griffin told us that we were not going to walk anymore or march anymore now the schools were open. So we kind of abandoned that, and we all went back to school, and kind of things kind of moved forward from that point. But I was in a unique position in that I was one of the guys that had transportation. So I was never put in a position to go to jail. So everything that I did was kind of it highlighted, so to speak, and Reverend Williams was our line leader, and he knew who to put at certain places to do certain things. And as Ms. Walker stated, we were taught how to react if others did some things to us as we went along. And I see some other demonstrators out there too. Catherine Scott sitting there. All of the pictures are at VCU down there. And we can just go back and look at all of this and just reminisce and see so many things that happened. Doris was there riding up and down. I always said that she went just because she was riding with me. And that she just enjoyed the ride and hung around the edges, you know, because she had her eyes on somebody else as long as she was walking the line down there. But it was very unique. Listen, I can tell you, I can go on with these stories.
Thank you. I can remember in 1964 when schools reopened, a lot of individuals came to Prince Edward to help assist and try to kind of reorganize us. And there was a lot of movies at the school and things like that. And people came in, particular teachers. And one teacher come to mind is a guy named T. Burrell Robinson. And he's still living. He lives in the Richmond area now. But he had a brother named George, and they lived out in Hampton, Sydney. And they were very, very friendly to us, and very friendly and mingle and try to organize us and take us on to Richmond and different places like that. But it got to the point that some of the school officials, mainly the school board, didn't like him in doing that. So a lot of people, some people probably won't recall, but that was actually 2 strikes. In 1969, I think it was about 200 students who walked out of the Prince Edward High School, well, at that time it was Moton High School, then walked out there and met at the courthouse, had a protest at the courthouse. You can look on the 69 yearbook from Moton High School, which is the last class of Moton. Then in 1970, it became Prince Edward High School. But I encourage you to look at that, and also, almost if you can read about some of the things T. Burrell Robinson did to help us, and they fired him. And that's what the protest was about. They fired him. So I'm pretty sure it's in the records of the school system, but if not, you look at that 69 yearbook and you'll see a bunch of students, myself included, was striking from the high school down to the courthouse. It had a rally at the courthouse. So maybe I'll look back in the Richmond Times-Dispatch. They were down there for doing that. So anyway, there was a lot of people who resisted people coming in to help educate, organize, and to cultivate us.
If anybody in the audience has any questions or comments that they would like to add, I'll bring the microphone around for everybody.
We'll come back and wrap up.
Yes, I would like to know, how did the Student Nonviolent Committee help you all get through your demonstrations? How did the SNCC help you get through your demonstrations? As far as how you acted once you got out of the public, if somebody scared on you, if somebody called you out of your name, how does SNCC help you get through that? We were just taught, what to do. Like I said, we had little semi classes with breakfast in the morning. And when SNCC came down, yes, we were just taught up at Donald, yeah, Donald, I can't think of the place now. But yeah, when they came down, they worked with us, and they would even go out on the street with us.
SNCC came in to help us organize. So they had already been to Danville. They had had some incidents in Danville, which luckily we did not have here. But they were basically helping us organize. They did march. They really looked at the March on Washington. You'll see Alvin Donaldson's picture. He was very involved in some other people. But that was sort of their role. And the focus was on nonviolence. And I had heard through Skip Griffin that they did want more activity, but they would say, no, we can't do whatever's happening then, we can't do this. We already don't have school systems. So we would really look crazy to the media. So that was basically their role, was to help us organize events, and then here and working in other cities.
Okay, I just wanted to say first thank you. And as far as within the communities, I know within Darlington Heights community, there were a lot of white neighbors that would come over to my grandfather's house and they would talk and sit and talk. Not so much going out together, but they would visit each other's houses and talk there. And also, during the time of the strike, there were a lot of them that supported what we were doing, but they couldn't come out with it, because as far as when Barbara was sent away, there was one of her white neighbors that told her parents that she should be sent out of town because of what might happen to her. I just want to say, I really enjoyed your stories. This is the first time I've heard a lot of the stories of what happened when students were out of school. And I have a sister-in-law sitting here who's 3 brothers were out of school. I know she says I always put her on the spot, but I would like for her to tell a little story about her 3 brothers who were out of school at that time. Oh, all right. In spite of what happened in the closing of the schools, something good came out of it for lots of students, including all those who are on the stage and many others sitting right here. Would you raise your hands if you're from Pennsylvania public schools? The free schools. I was a teacher in the free schools, and I taught some of those students on the stage, and those who raised their hands. And I'm happy to see all of them here today. But I have 3 brothers, and it's a long story, so I'm going to try to make it short. 3 boys were who grew up on a farm in western Pennsylvania County in Hampton, near where some of the others are from. And because the first year, Dad kept all 3 of them, I believe, at school. And then he had one leave, one at a time. When the American Friends Service Committee came, he had one leave the first year because he was the little one, and he volunteered to leave. He went to school in South Hill, and stayed with the principal and his family, and graduated from East End High School, and then proceeded to Berea College, where they helped him get his education, then to the University of Missouri, where he got a master's degree, and the University of Cincinnati with a PhD in Germany. And he taught at Wayne State University, well, at UVA for a while also, but at Wayne State he retired 2 years ago. He's still in Detroit. And then his second one went to Morristown, New Jersey, and he lived with four Quaker families. He thought that was sort of a frightening experience for him because they moved in from one family to another before the end of the year. And then the third one went to Arlington, Virginia, and stayed with a family there. And when the schools reopened, when the free schools reopened, he came back to Prince Edward and graduated, and he was one of my students in the French class as well as English, because I taught there for 34 years, and of course I had taught previously in Petersburg for 2 years. So I had 36 years experience, not including for free schools. Of course, you weren't given credit for that year. So, she put me on the spot. So I'll end it with this. I'm very proud of all these students because all of them have done exceptionally well in their careers in life. Although many others are included in the lost generation.
Thank you all so much. I'm one of you all, and I'm very proud of you all. Even though I was, I learned some things I didn't know about you all. And I want to ask Mr. Hammond, I want to go back to when you were walking and you saw that Air Force flag. Was that the determining factor of what branch you would go? I knew you didn't want to go to the Army, but was that the determining factor?
That was after I spoken with the recruiter. It just felt right for me as an alternative. And I could see myself somehow being able to move forward. Now, even though I did not get directly into the administrative field, for 20 years, I managed in my career field as a medic. I managed 2 emergency rooms. I managed flying crews. I flew for aeromedical evacuation. I flew for 8 years. And I retired as superintendent of nursing services. So all of those were in management positions. I wanted to go back to just a brief moment when we were talking about what was happening in the 1960s in Prince Edward County and how did it affect my life or our lives. And you've heard the expression, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Well, I wasn't here, but wherever I was exposed to other things that was going on. It's like during 1964, the summer of 1964, I happened to be in Montgomery, Alabama. Who was governor? George Wallace. The Air Force was opening a new hospital at Maxwell Air Force Base. Governor Wallace was invited to attend. He sent back a message to the Air Force that says the only way he would attend is if no black military faces could be seen. In 1965, when Lester Maddox stood in the doorway of his restaurant with an axe helve waving it to say that he would dare any black face to come across the threshold of that restaurant. I was in Savannah, Georgia. During the Watts riot, I was in North Carolina, and many people were on edge because of what was going on at that moment. And there was always a fear that this would be like a flashover in a fire. And many people would come to me and says, well, how can people just burn down their own things? And I would say, if you lived in the footprint of where these people live, you would be burning down too. The Watts riots got a start from some simple little thing that could have been remedied. A man who had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning in order to be able to get to his job by 9 o'clock in the morning had to take like 3 buses in order to get there. And what they really wanted was the city to arrange transportation so that people could have easier access. And they refused to do it.
So this is what you're talking about, how the officials here helped you, the police helped you. During the Albany movement, Chief Pritchard there in Albany, Georgia, did the same thing. But he did it because he studied Gandhi's method of direct action. He understood that direct action was meant to elicit a response from those officials, a violent response, so that you could be on the news so that people could see what the South was doing. So I'm going to say that they weren't trying to help you, they were trying to help themselves.
I just want to say that when as we were listening to our panelists talk about the relationships in the community, for me, the relationship with our white neighbors stemmed from the fact that my father said, you must have an impeccable character. Anything outside of good character would instigate some kind of negative response. So if we stayed in character, were mannerly, spoke well, didn't give eye-to-eye contact, and they were in our midst, and this was our teaching, this was Dad's telling us, this is how you need to operate around our white counterparts in order to have harmony in our midst. And that's what we did.
And I'd like to add to that, if I could. I remember the sentiment was that in the white leadership, we had good Negroes here. They didn't cause trouble. They stayed in their place. Which goes to exactly what you were saying back there.
Hello. Langston Hughes, thank you first of all for telling your story. Langston Hughes has a saying, what happens to a dream deferred? Are there any of you among the panel and among the audience that feel that had the schools not closed, you would have been doing something different? And if so, how did it change I know it changed your life, but are there any of you that had like a dream that you wanted to do something, or you had to, do something different when everything changed?
I just know for myself personally, when the schools closed, I was like tall. I was a second grader being promoted to the third grade. That first year I was kind of crushed, and I kept thinking this was kind of a vacation. When year 2 came around, panic set in. The things that happened along the way, and I didn't hear mention of this group, but it was a safe haven for me during that time. I'm out of First Baptist Church, and a lot of things went on in First Baptist Church. Dr. King came there. But there was also a reading room on the first floor of Beulah AME Church. You could read books. There was a newspaper, I think it was the Afro-American, that would keep you hip to everything. Just the people that I came in contact over life, I just remember as a child, my parents always said to stay from over at Longwood College. And in our family, we had the impression that if something went wrong over there, they were going to blame you. Thankfully, and this is the strange, weird thing about my story, there were 7 in my family that were impacted by the schools closing. One of my older sisters went away to Buffalo, New York to finish school and never came back. For myself, I didn't go anywhere. It's just the school environment of First Baptist came around that reading room. Thank God for the times when you belong to everyone in the neighborhood. When schools reopened, I was with the graduating class of 68. As much as I was told about Long College and staying away from there, life experience, I wanted to be a teacher. That was always my thing. Thank God I was able to get an undergraduate degree in business education, a master's degree in education, community and college counseling, and Dr. Atkinson was my advisor. And when I tell young folks now, I retired in 2008, I worked with youth in the city of Lynchburg and youth with behavioral issues. I always stress upon them that it doesn't necessarily matter where we start in life. What we want is a good ending. It's a good ending. Looking back at everything that we went through, we had to grow up quick. And I mean quick. And it wasn't easy. It divided some families. But Hannah Jackson sang the song, "My Soul Is Back." I wonder, how did I make it on that? German philosopher Nietzsche said, "It's that which doesn't kill us that makes us stronger." And I see Ms. Franklin over there, my French teacher, it just takes me back to high school. I'm glad that things worked out as they did, and it was God's plan, and I thank Him for that.
Opening the schools is akin to killing somebody. Closing the schools is, you kill your hopes and your dreams. And I wonder through this ordeal, did it strengthen you culturally? Did it shape your values as Black people?
It made me more resilient. I was determined that this was not going to keep me down. that somewhere, somehow, I would find a way to get out of this. And through the grace of God, through the grace of God, things did work out. I had said earlier that if you're happy at this moment in your life, you'd have to know that everything before this moment got you to this moment. There's a lady in the bookstore that I met at Kittrell College when schools closed here. She's not from Farmville. She's from Miami. Had I not gone to Kittrell College because of schools closing, I might have missed that lady. We've been married for 53 years now.
As I said earlier, we were a faith-based community, and the experiences that we encounter really did better us in more ways than one. Right now, I'm looking out and I can thank a lot of the people for being in my life at that particular age, at that particular time. We looked up to the older teens. We looked up to the young adults. We looked up to the juniors and seniors, even in high school. We experienced a lot, and we had those mentors in our community, mentors in our church that we looked up to, that were leaders, and I can call some names, and Elsa was one of our leaders in high school. We looked up to her. She helped us through a lot of things. She tutored us a lot in helping us get to where we needed to go. Catherine back there, cuz, come on now. You were one of the strengths that we looked up to in church and in school. All of the Darlington Heights group, you all were older than we were, but we had a lot of input from you all. See, most of you all don't know it, but my grandmother was a John, so Joan married into Joan is a part of family, along with a lot of you all out there. So the Berryman, the Dungy name, masked the Hetty Johns name. So my grandmother was Hetty Johns, related to Barbara Johns, but I just never shared that with anybody through the years. So that is how we grew up. We were faith-based. We were focused. We had goals. We were goal-oriented. We culturally, as you were saying, culturally, we were together. We were a part of an experience that we believed that God was at the center of for us to move forward for His purpose. And I'm right today, not only then, but I'm living some of the experiences right today from some of what happened then. Our old professor at seminary told me one time that God opens His hand, He doesn't open His hand up to you all at once. He opened it up to you one finger at a time. One finger at a time. And I look back on that experience right today, and I can see how my life is still being blessed and still being because a part of that experience then, there are still avenues that I see on the horizon going forward through the Prince Edward County Alumni Association, growing stronger and stronger and stronger. And you can see the hand of God working in that through the course of it all. And sometimes, as in my summation, when we get to a point to realize that everything is working against us, you got to go back to the old prophet Jeremiah, that always give me strength and always let me know that everything that we experienced was for a purpose that God had orchestrated from the very beginning. When Jeremiah got to complaining, he said, let me carry you down to the potter's house and let me show you something. And he said, now, we are all his children. Now, I'm just bringing it on forward now. If we are all in his hand and he is in charge, somebody here know what I'm talking about. If he's in charge, then if the clay that's on the wheel, if it's marred, then he is able to make it over again. Now, the question is, in his hands, it's in his hand as we move forward. And if it stays in his hand, that's how we strengthen ourselves culturally, that's how we strengthen ourselves individually, in whatever avenues we take. We were always taught not to hate, but take everything and move forward with the hand of God in it. And also, I found out years ago, I heard this from one of those senators, said that hate always erodes the container it's carried in.
I guess I could say that basically, from all that's happened, I'm not sure the gentleman asked will I be doing something different. I'm pretty sure I would not be doing anything different, because when I was in the 11th grade, one of the teachers had all of us to put down what our ambition may be, or what we wanted to do in life. And I put down two, either to be an attorney or a mortician. So I didn't be an attorney, but I am a mortician. But I've had a rough life, but all of those struggles have certainly made me much stronger. And I believe we can do anything you want to do. I never let anybody discourage me to do anything. I know when I started my funeral business in 1983, people said, no, you ain't gonna be able to make it. You got one business been here over 50 years, another one been about 47. How in the world you think you're gonna make it? But I told that person, with the help of the Lord, I'm gonna do it. And now today it's come to full fruition. Yes, it's full. And you can't believe that. But also the Lord has put a lot of people in my life that's really, I've learned, and some of their wisdom have rubbed off on me. Like Reverend Griffin, I've also had the opportunity to be around individuals in Congress now, but his name is Don Byer, who is a congressman, but at that time he was running for lieutenant governor, and he came by my house to talk to me about helping him on the campaign, because he understood the closing the school and thought I had a good insight and had a good feel for the sensitivity that he should display among people. So and I traveled all over the Commonwealth in a private jet with him, and also with Mark Warner. And one time when Barack Obama was thinking about he was campaigning for president. And Don Byer had a fundraiser at his house in Alexandria, Virginia. I never will forget. And the fee to get in that event was $50,000 per person. And I said, Don, he said, come on to the house. I said, but I ain't got no $50,000 to give anybody. I wish I did, but no, not $50,000. He said, you come, and I said, well, what about at that time, Barack had Secret Service too. And I said, what about Secret Service? He said, well, I'll give them your name, your social security number, and other information. And that this is my house, and you my friend, and you invite to this event. And that was it. So, and he cleared me with the Secret Service, because at that time, it was about a couple months before he became president, and he was tightly guarded at that time. But I had the opportunity to mingle, not with him and also Mark Warner, in their business relations. I used to travel with them, and they had to stop by their office and have a meeting here and there, because they were aspiring to be politicians then. So, and I sit in the meeting with them, just like everybody else sitting there. I had nothing to do with it, but I was just sitting there looking and listening. But I learned from how they dealt, and I learned how they did things, and how they became successful. Very few folk in this room know that Mark Warner wasn't born rich. He's worth about over $400 million now. But I remember Mark Warner when he got kicked out of his house because he couldn't pay his rent. And driving a Skylark Buick. It's a magazine with that story on it. But somehow his aunt gave him $10,000. He invest that $10,000 in cellular communication. And that's when all these cell phones was on the verge of becoming there. And he made money. He became a millionaire overnight. So he came from rags to riches from nothing. That you get kicked out of your apartment because you can't pay your rent. But now he's a U.S. senator, and he'll tell you the same thing if you ask him. I'm going to find that articles in Newsweek about that. But anyway, make a long story short, that it's being around, the association around people like that has developed me and had made me a wise and shrewd business person, and it certainly has helped me a lot. So, and I'm not going to say too much because I got a book that's being published. It's being formatted now for a book now, and a publisher coming in North Carolina, and that book is called Joy and Pain, My Way. So pretty soon it'll be out on that. I had to get that little promotional information, but all of the struggles in my life have helped me to become stronger. One last thing I'll say is, recently I had a pinched nerve in my neck, so I had surgery down in Durham about 3 weeks ago. And even out of that surgery, I'm still recovering from that. That's why my voice is not quite what it could be. I had neck surgery. It went into my neck and pushed some vocal cords and all that to the side. But it gave me, from that point, I was a walker, and now I have a cane, but it gave me to have a good sensitivity to people who are handicapped. So the Lord put things in your life to better you. And now I have...
The evening has just been marvelous. I've enjoyed every one of them. And I've been trying to put together in my mind what has been going on a lot of the time. And the young lady over here talked about her father telling her that about having impeccable character. And I think this really brings it home. And then Mrs. Shepardson this morning said she didn't think things had changed that much when she got back here. And we talk about the impeccable character and the not changing, but we're teaching our kids even today that they have to have impeccable character. And if not, they won't be able to become president of the United States. Nobody got my sarcasm.
I would like to thank the panel for your insight this afternoon. My wife, the lady up on the panel,
Amen.
We were able to make the other part of this weekend. But I want to add one thought, and the wife and I talked about it, or Merv and I talked about it. What happened here in Prince Edward County, when we look at where we are today, how we got through it, Prince Edward County was selected by God because we were strong enough to handle it.
Amen.
And we have come through. It has made us stronger.
All right.
Everybody is not on the same trip together. But for what we have been able to do, what God has allowed us to do, it was divine intervention, as Barbara said. Every action has a reaction. The strike, the lawsuits, the walkouts, the walk-ins, all of this made us stronger. And we are better for today because it happened to us and not somebody else.
Thank you. I'd like to say that I have enjoyed all of the conversations we've had today. And what happened, my name is Ina Marley. I'm a daughter of town. The war act did not affect me, so I graduated the year before it happened. I graduated in 1958. But what I've been hearing today is basically success stories of how everybody came out and they overcome. They managed to reach the level, I guess, of whatever they wanted to reach their goal. What I would like to say is that, what about the ones that did not make it? The ones who, when they were in school, they aspired to make things go right with them, but they couldn't do it because of the school closing. What about them? Who speaks for them? Is there anybody who speaks for them? There are a lot of them who, because of their circumstances, they couldn't go to different places. They couldn't go to another state or another place. They felt those are the ones that we lost. We lost, and who knows how many of them that would have made it that didn't because of that strike. Okay. Yeah, because people of different backgrounds, different things. A lot of children during that time, and I know I was there, they depended on school. They depended on it because that's the way they had, even sometimes to get away from circumstances at home. They came to school. And then the school closed on them. And then where were they? Do we know? No, we lost them. They are a lost generation. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak today, everyone.
Okay. I just want to say a couple of things. You know, you don't give up. I would never want schools to be closed, education be presented for anybody to get an education. But it did happen here in Prince Edward County, but we can't give up. I know when we left here and went to school in Berea, Kentucky, I got there, it was a Berea college, but they had a foundation part for the younger students. But when I got there, we didn't realize that you had to be in 9th grade. And when I got there, I was supposed to go into 8th grade. So they told me that I had to come back to Prince Edward County. But then the dean and some of the professors got together, realizing what had happened in Prince Edward County. And they gave me a test to take. I passed the test, so I was able to stay there for 2 years because and go to 9th grade instead of 8th grade, and I came back here. But what I'm saying is that you don't want to prevent anybody from getting an education, but it happened here. And it happened here, and to me, I got, I guess, different experience than some others would have gotten, or I would have gotten if schools had not closed. I enjoyed being there. I miss my family, but I enjoyed being there, and I learned a lot. But, you know, education is important, and I would never, ever want schools or any type of education to be prevented from anybody.
To address what you just said, in western Prince Edward County, in the Pamplin and Five Fork area, there were a lot of people, and some in Darlington Heights as well, that did not finish school. They did not go back to school, but they were very successful in what they did. They were highly successful in what they did with 6th grade education, 7th grade education. They found a way within themselves to move forward. As I said, irregardless to the situation, we were set up in a faith-based situation that pursued whatever, that had us to go in whatever direction we pursued. If they couldn't come back to school and they went to work, they were successful in that area of expertise in whatever they did. So I would like to say that may not be all of them, but I know that a lot of people today that were highly successful, and you would never know they didn't have anything but a 6th or 7th grade education.
We'll take this final question. Yep.
I'd like to say that I agree with Mr. Ray that there were a lot of kids who didn't get an education at all. And having spoken to some of them, they are still very hurt about the situation. And one of the things that my sister wanted to do, as she did, was to find out what happened to the students who were denied education, because she felt that some of the things that happened in 1951 resulted in the school closings. However, she didn't regret what she had done, but she certainly was worried about the students who missed school, and she felt that they may have been a consequence to walking out of school in 1951. So we do have people in the community who never got a chance to get an education, and that is very sad. And also, I understand from reading a book, there are some white people who do not get an education, and I often wonder what happened to them. And would they ever tell us stories? So, it's something. I mean, it's really a lot to learn about the people. Because as I said, I tried to get some to talk to, say, an author about their situation, but they said they just couldn't. They were still too hurt and too bitter. So, there are still people in the community who do not get education.
Before I close out, I will just ask our panelists if you have any closing comments to make.
One brief closing comment, and I do agree that education is extremely important. But what I have learned over time is that we have different types of learners. We have right brain learners and left brain learners. The right brain learner is the one that gets his or her education by sitting down in a classroom and absorbing what's coming at them from the teachers. The left brain learner is more one that works with hands and coming up with things and creating things. Speaking to that, there's a gentleman out in Rice, Jones Construction. Only has a third grade education, but he builds beautiful homes. And he's done extremely well. And he's put every one of his kids through college. So it's a matter of what are you determined to do that will keep you moving forward.
Anyone else in the panel? Well, I thank you all for your questions and your engagement. Grateful to our panelists for sharing their story and their experiences. And thank you all in this room, those of you impacted by the closing of public schools here in Prince Edward, for your sacrifice. Because it is that sacrifice that has saved public education and allows the opportunity for those to continue today with their education. So thank you all, and I will turn it over to Mr. G, who will offer a few announcements.
Tried to figure out how to bring about about a cross-section of persons who had been impacted. And we, I believe, were successful because they all had a different story of what happened to them. They all talked about the persons and groups that might have helped them along the way. We know for sure the Virginia Teachers Association, which used to be the Black Teachers Association in the Commonwealth, helped with those training centers that they said they went to in church basements or homes. We know that the American Friends Service Committee, the social arm of the Quakers, helped because some of them went to Berea as a result of Quaker work. Or the 66 of us that the Quakers sent all across the country. Hamlin talked about Kittrell College, which was the higher educational institution for the African Methodist Episcopal Church and the 2nd Episcopal District, and Virginia was in the 2nd Episcopal District, and our bishop made Kittrell available to Prince Edward because of our historical involvement in education. All had different impacts, yet all have come out to be productive citizens in our community. We believe that as you look around our community, you will see more examples like that. It's hard to reach those who are embarrassed by their situation and those who are not willing to admit what position they are in. It's hard to reach them, yet we know it has been a detrimental impact in our community. We see it in our social groups, we see it in our civic groups, we see it at church, where that generational gap is there as a result of so many who were considered that lost generation. It is indeed hard for us even who work in the community now, not just to talk to those persons, but to ask them to become involved in the community. There is a withdrawal, a self-containment. I don't want to be. I guess it's a problem of overcoming the hurt, the anger, the distrust that might be there. We are thankful to these panel members who didn't have that problem, who were glad to share with you their experience, even if I had to drag it out of them. We are indeed appreciative of all of you for being here, for the great participation that we've gotten from our audience. You know we're going to continue this evening at 6 at the Nance room of the Doral Hall on Longwood campus. We're going to have dinner, then we're going to have a discussion on Griffin. And hopefully we will leave there and come back here tomorrow morning for our intergenerational panel of persons affected by the closing of public schools and their son or daughter with them. We believe that will indeed help us to try to figure out